Albert Einstein, Awe and Wonder by Eileen Endres. Albert Einstein was one of the greatest scientific minds of the 20th century and the most well-known scientist of all time. Einstein's passion and his perpetual curiosity drove him to pursue the depths of science which others could not conceive. It was his reverence toward nature and his inner drive out of love to truly uncover the secrets the universe withholds. Einstein's theories revolutionized the field of science and paved the way for modern physics. Albert Einstein never lost his childlike curiosity. This genius dared to expand beyond highly acclaimed scientists such as Isaac Newton, the father of classical physics. Questioning became a part of his nature. Some consider this a virtue, while others a fault. It isn't until someone comes along, not only altering the course of traditional physics and constructing new theories of the universe, but doing it with a smile on his face, all for the love of science herself, which truly changes the definition of the word genius. Albert Einstein's simple virtue led him to remain ever curious, even as his intellect soared. Evelyn Einstein, his granddaughter, said, "I think it was this talent of his to remain the child within himself that aided him in his scientific pursuits. He never lost his childlike awe of the universe." As a boy, Albert Einstein was quite unique. He didn't talk until age 3, but merely observed. Little Einstein was a well-known introvert. He often stared into space. Pictures constantly dominated his thoughts. The family maid referred to him as the dopey one. Einstein's imagination was his life. From a young age, Einstein was fascinated with aspects of nature and the fundamental laws of the universe. After his father brought him home a compass, his hands shook with the fascination of magnetism. The physicist recalled how this experience had a profound effect on him. Something deeply hidden had to be behind things. In 1896, Einstein graduated from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. In 1902, the graduate was hired by his friend Marcel Grossmann to be an inspection clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, Switzerland. The rebel behavior of critical analysis served him well at the office. Einstein called his office that worldly cloister where I hatched all my most beautiful ideas. The job gave him more freedom than a professorship would and gave him time to work on his own ideas. Einstein was captivated with theoretical physics, discerning the functions of the vast universe and thus reducing into mathematical equations. He made analogies and created images based on pure thought. This type of process he called thought experiments. Other scientists use experimentation in a lab. The isolation in the office may have been what Einstein needed to hatch his ideas. He had no doctorate, no lab, or contacts. In 1905, the 26-year-old Einstein published 4 revolutionary articles in the German science journal, Annalen der Physik, or Annals of Physics. His tools were paper, a pencil, and his own imagination. Einstein's mere daydreams would become his reality. The first article dealt with the structure of light, expanding beyond the work of James Clerk Maxwell and Max Planck. Einstein used the quantum theory of light to explain the photoelectric effect. Einstein assured Planck of his ideas, in which Planck questioned. Between Planck and Einstein, this had begun a new branch, quantum physics. Television, lasers, remote controls, and computer chips were all products of this same concept. At the turn of the 20th century, the existence of atoms were suspected. Einstein wrote in his second and third articles that Brownian motion, or random movement of particles, is evidently the cause of the motion of atoms. With his second paper, Einstein's calculations would become a part of a larger assortment of evidence to the existence of atoms. The fourth article of 1905, the dreamer asked the nagging question on his mind since age 16. What would one see if one could ride on a beam of light? This led him to a special theory of relativity which turned traditional physics upside down. Einstein wrote, "A storm broke in my mind. Everything came loose." He explained that time and space are not absolute, but relative to the observer. One of Einstein's greatest gifts was to put ideas into visual analogies that we can all understand. For example, a railroad train traveling at the speed of light. With this same thought process, Einstein came to his most famous equation, E equals mc squared.
It follows from the special theory of relativity that mass and energy are but different manifestations of the same thing. A somewhat unfamiliar conception for the average mind. Furthermore, the equation E is equal mc squared, in which energy is put equal to mass multiplied with the square of the velocity of light, showed that very small amount of mass may be converted into a very large amount of energy, and vice versa.
This very equation explained the existence of heavenly bodies such as stars all the way to the splitting of the atom. He was credited father of the atomic bomb due to the production of the atomic bomb via his equation. Albert Einstein would become one of the leading spokesmen against the bomb. In 1905, what's considered Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, or Latin for Year of Wonders, he constructed 4 groundbreaking articles, completed his doctoral thesis, and earned his PhD from Zurich University. Some scientists were skeptical of the articles, while others rejoiced as an answer to their problems. The scientist said the key to his miracle year was remaining a child, asking the simplest of questions. These articles explain the quantum theory of light, expounded beyond Brownian motion, and altered our notions of space, time, matter, and energy. Einstein thought of these problems simultaneously. These articles revolutionized the field of science and lit the way for modern physics. Up until this point, Einstein was simply a patent clerk, an outsider with a knack to see the world in a new way. In March of 1916, to complete relativity, Einstein published the foundation of the general theory of relativity. He claimed space and time weren't simply the background of the universe, but rather joined into space-time. Furthermore, Einstein used his new theory to predict that starlight would bend when passing the sun. In May of 1919, on a total eclipse of the sun, Einstein's equations were confirmed. The bending of light rays are due to the warping of space-time depending on the mass of matter, therefore causing the star to appear in a different location. Gravity was the result of the warping of space-time rather than a force or attraction as Newton had claimed. Albert Einstein solved problems that most scientists didn't even know existed. The London Times screamed, "Revolution science! New theory of universe! Newtonian ideas overthrown!" The fact that people didn't understand the German physicist's work didn't matter. What mattered is that they ate up this absent-minded scientist with the mind-boggling ideas who contemplated a new theory of the universe. Einstein said, "In the past, it never occurred to me that every casual remark of mine would be snatched up and recorded. Otherwise, I would have crept further into my shell." In 1921, Albert Einstein won the Nobel Prize for the photon theory of light. In the same year, he accepted an invitation by Chaim Weizmann, the leader of the Zionist movement, to tour the United States to raise money for the Hebrew University. Einstein gave talks, interviews, and speeches on pacifism, freedom, Zionism, and human rights. He felt a moral obligation to use his fame to help make the world a better place. Einstein became chairman of the Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists to regulate the spread of the bomb. On April 18, 1955, the world's most famous scientist died. Albert Einstein believed only true scientists entered the temple of science out of love. He wrote letters of love, dedication, curiosity, and humility that are all important traits of a scientist to scientists such as Max Planck, whom he deeply respected. Many kinds of men devote themselves to science, and not all for the sake of science herself. There are some who come into her temple because it offers opportunity to display their particular talents. He described many scientists as athletes showing their talents and businessmen concerned with the fortune. Einstein gave, moreover, he lived an example of a scientist totally captivated by the study of the physical world. With each new discovery of the weak and strong forces hidden within the bonds of the atom, it became increasingly difficult to solve the unifying force. Einstein was way ahead of his time. Today, scientists inspired by his ambition still search for an underlying force. On April 26, 1955, Cornelius Langevin sent the following words to Albert Einstein's daughter. "It is hard to realize that this man, so unbelievably modest and unassuming, abides with us here no longer. He was aware of the unique role that fate had bestowed upon him, and aware too of his greatness. But precisely because this greatness was so telling, it made him modest and humble, not as a pose, but as an inner necessity."